campus and the economic development that it can help facilitate.
That's great. Gwinnett's got 13 cities and more CIDs than anybody.
Yep.
Yeah. I got a ton for sure. Okay, Mr. White, you want to go next?
Yes, my name is Andre White. I am a 30-year publisher of the GeorgiaSentinelNews.com, and I am a lobbyist, or have been a lobbyist, for Wayfield Foods, which is has a presence in the city of South Fulton.
Good.
Okay. Pastor Williams, you want to chime in next?
Good morning, gentlemen. Pastor Dart Williams. I pastor the New Life Presbyterian Church on Old National Highway. I've been pastoring there now going on 4 years, and have a great interest in the development in the city of South Fulton. So good to meet you all.
Sir.
All right. Mr. Winbush.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Don Winbush. I have worked with the Old National Merchants Association for a number of years, including as president, vice president, 30-year resident of this area, and I'm self-employed as a marketing and public relations person and voiceover artist. Glad to be aboard.
Great. Mr. St. James.
Can y'all hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right, all right. How's everybody doing?
Great, sir. Thank you.
All right, all right. Sorry about the video capability, but I will get that corrected. But I'm Ronald St. James of St. James Live. I have a live music venue. Been there about 6 years off of Button Road. Been proud to be in the community and looking forward to doing some great things. So thank y'all all so much.
It's exciting.
Thanks for being here. And we got Deanna.
Hello, good morning. I'm just a new member of the community, just moved into Union Crossing, just interested to see what the future is for South Fulton. I'm excited about it as being a new resident. And it's funny, have a connection with Reverend Williams because I used to work for Johnson C. Smith Theological Seminary, and I also got married there when Dr. Lonnie Oliver was the pastor. Small world.
And see, we got Chantel Francois. She's actually the tourism manager for the city of South Fulton. So good morning.
Good morning, everyone.
And we have Corey Adams, who's the city clerk. He's on the call today too. So just want to say good morning to him.
I like that bow tie.
Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. Happy to be here. Happy to see many longtime friends and acquaintances over the years.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Adams. And then we have our other board member just popped up. She's a little sideways on the screen. There, you're muted.
Okay. Good morning.
We're just doing introductions of the board members.
Okay, good morning. I'm Joyce Hackett-Scales, and I'm store manager for Kroger.
On Old National.
Fun, Ms. Hackett-Scales.
Well, actually now I've moved. I'm at the Kroger Cascade in 285.
Got it.
Okay, good. All right. Excellent. Okay. Well, what we're going to do now is we're going to kick it over to Dan McRae, and I'm going to let Dan kind of introduce himself and tell you what he does. But I just want to say that he's the best in the business, and so he is the one that really has done a lot of the transformative deals that you've heard about in the state of Georgia, and I won't tell all of them, but you all know when the Atlanta Braves turned into the Cobb County Braves, Dan McRae was the one that kind of orchestrated that whole move. So that kind of gives you an idea of just the depth of his experience and knowledge as it relates to economic development, authorities, and deal structuring. And so I'm going to let him go ahead and do his presentation. And Dan, let me share my screen with you. All right, Dan, you should be able to share your screen, and it's all yours.
Thank you. Let me do the best I can with this.
Oh, Dan, before you get started, I see Councilwoman Gums just jumped on the call. Just wanted to recognize her and say good morning.
Good morning.
Would you like to say anything
Morning.
before we get started?
No, just excited for this meeting and to learn more. So thank you for putting this together.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you for being here. Okay, Dan.
I'm gonna try again. I didn't see it last time.
You should-
Wait, there it is. There it is. Look there. You're always delighted when technology works the way it's supposed to, you know. So I'm delighted and surprised every time.
There you go.
Well, I am especially delighted to be here with everybody. I've been not since 1992, like John said, but quite a while involved in and keeping my eye on that part of the county, South Fulton County, and now the city of South Fulton. And somebody once said, nothing is as irresistible as an idea whose time has come, and this may be that time. It's great to see the city thoughtfully creating these tools to get economic development and redevelopment done and to better everybody's lives. And the Downtown Development Authority is a very important tool. So, you know, I've been doing this long. I won't tell you how long I've been doing it, but it's a long time. I remember going out and doing a presentation on the South Fulton, about the South Fulton Parkway, on the South Fulton Parkway, before it was there, using an overhead projector. I mean, that's how long I've been doing this stuff. Long enough that I used to be able to do presentations without a PowerPoint, but now, like everybody else, I can't. So I've got one. As I go through this, I'm going to make sure that you get the essentials of what you need as board members. And I'm going to tell you some more stories that will bring these things to life. And they are important to you as board members. I mean, what's happened to some other people as they've gone through their careers as board members could happen to you. So it's good to learn from other folks' experiences. But I do hope as we're doing this, that if a thought occurs to you or a question occurs to you, just blurt it out. Don't hold back. And we'll stop what we're doing and talk about that and one way or another get you the information that you need. So with that, let me get started. I like the city seal here. That's pretty. And it works really well with my PowerPoint color. So that turned out good. This is a question you may not have asked, but why do we have downtown development authorities in the first place? I know I'm a board member and I know it's a downtown development authority, but why do we even have DDAs? Some states don't have DDAs. So here's a real good reason. One of the functions that a development authority has, whether it's a DDA or a citywide authority, countywide authority, joint authority, is to protect the local government. In this case, it's the city. And, you know, these days you can't hardly sell movie tickets without having a superhero. So I've got my own superhero here. This is DDA Man that you see there. And he's very modern. You see him on his phone, but he's got his cape on. That's how you know he's a superhero. What he's reading is a section from the Georgia Code, Title 36, Chapter 42, which is the Downtown Development Authority's law, which governs our Downtown Development Authority and all the other statutory DDAs. And it says that the city is not liable for the DDA's debts or contracts. So that's an important shield. The city can go about the business of economic development, redevelopment, revitalization without exposing the taxpayers to liability. And that's real important. It's not to say that the DDA might not incur its own obligations, but the DDA doesn't have taxing power. So that's an important distinction. That's reason number one why we have a DDA, protect the city. Another aspect of that is this, that how many of y'all, we've heard a good bit about CIDs and other forms of public bodies. Who's been on the body? We have an elected official here, of course. Besides our elected official, our councilwoman, do we have someone who's been on the board of an authority, who's been elected to office, who's been appointed to something, some official position? Anybody? Okay, there's one.
I have.
Yes, you have, Chris, bless your heart. That's Albany. Chris did a great job in Albany and they miss him. do the rest of y'all realize you're public officials now? You really are. You gave up being private when you took this job. You are now a public official. Congratulations. But you're a special type of public official. You're appointed. You don't run for election to the board of the DDA, and you don't run for re-election to the board of the DDA. So you can afford to be the ones that get tossed the tough decisions. You know, an example I use a lot is we have a board member here is involved with Kroger. This was a Kroger up in North Georgia, where the company was either going to close down the Kroger store or they were going to open a larger one that would be a destination. And they had to have the incentives that it took, property tax abatement that it took to make it work. Well, that was after some study, and then we did a cost benefit study and did an MOU that had provisions in it, including not keeping the old store dark, but making it available for somebody to come in and rent or buy, including a competing grocery store. So that deal closed and everything was fine until there was a turnover on the county commission. Then everything that was good was bad and everything that was bad was good. So this deal was viewed as being bad, and they cut off the funding for the county development authority and ran the executive director off. And that was some years ago. They've now kissed and made up, sort of, but as recently as last year, I was still helping folks in that community try to win past that. So if you do this job long enough, and it may not take long, you'll be in a position where there'll be pressures to do this, pressures not to do that, and the challenge that you will have will be to be a good board member and to make an informed decision that you believe is the best for the community. And then you don't have to worry about getting reelected. Powers. I mean, we've all gotten used to economic development being a public function and something that is necessary. But in 1968, the year that I graduated from Emory College, was the year that economic development first became a public purpose in the state of Georgia. Before that, it was not. And that's why we had to amend the Constitution by referendum to authorize economic development, the promotion of the development of trade, commerce, industry, and employment opportunities. But the way the constitutional amendment was written, and you see it there, that's the 1968 amendment, it didn't give economic development powers to everybody. In fact, it didn't give it to cities and it didn't give it to counties. It gave it to development authorities. It authorized the General Assembly to create or authorize the creation of development authorities to do economic development. Now, subsequently, some other general laws have been passed, like the Urban Redevelopment Law and Redevelopment Powers Law, that give some redevelopment powers to cities. So those are kind of shared. If you're a DDA, you have revitalization and redevelopment as your purpose. So you've got those powers, and if the city has redevelopment powers, and South Fulton does, that's the basis for having the tax allocation districts, then those are shared. But pure out economic development, only development authorities. And remember that if you share powers, you, the city, can choose to use the DDA to protect you instead of being the one to do it directly. And become experts. We got some experts in the meeting this morning. Some folks who may not feel like they are experts. Expertise comes from a lot of things. It comes from education, which is why we have the training requirement. It comes from experience, which is the best teacher, but the slowest and the most painful. But you will become the subject matter expert in South Fulton over time. And that one great quote from Rosalind Carter there: a leader takes people where they want to go. A great leader takes them when they don't want to go, but ought to. And that kind of goes back to my Kroger store up in North Georgia. You make the hard decision when you're called on to do it. What if we didn't have development authorities? Georgia, and you'll see more about this a little later, we've got a strong constitution. It was a while when I didn't think Alabama had a constitution at all, because it seemed like they could do anything they wanted to. Georgia's constitution prohibits gifts and gratuities. It prohibits the public sector from conferring a gift or gratuity on the private sector. So you know, what can somebody give me a synonym for gratuity? Just pick a word, anything. Y'all are very cautious. Usually I get in response to that bribe, but that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for incentive. That's right. You know, you incentivize a company to do what they might or might not have done, where they might not have done it, and do it in a way that you won't done, they might have not done. But in order to do that, the incentive has to be done legally. And in Georgia, with our Constitution, a taxing body can't do that. And even a development authority can't give stuff away. But a development authority and a DDA, because of that constitutional provision and because of the provisions in the Downtown Development Authority's law, are the one place where incentives and the powers to do it and the bonds that create the structure that is needed in this state coincide. That's a Venn diagram. And where those three circles overlap, there you find the DDA or the Development Authority. So without them in this state, no development authority, no property tax incentives, no cash or in-kind incentives. And that's an Attorney General's opinion from 1998. It's kind of like, you know, that Battlestar Galactica reimagining where they said this has all happened before and will all happen again. You know, every now and then we forget about gifts and gratuities and have to be reminded. So this is Senator Paul Brown from Athens in 1998 writing the Attorney General to say, can we give stuff away to induce economic development in Athens? And the answer is no, it violates the Constitution. So if you can't give stuff away, what can you do? Well, here's the process that you use. This is called bonds for title. So we have a development authority like the DDA, that's up in the top right. You start by it creating a bond. And how does the bond get created? You'll hear a lot about industrial development revenue bonds and revenue bonds. Well, if I'm doing the deal for you, I actually create it. We have some green paper down at the office, and my long-suffering assistant, Jeanette, creates a bond. It's been approved by the DDA and signed by the officers. So we then hand that over to the company in exchange for the deed to the project. So these are cashless, really. It's designed to create the structure. Now, at that point in time, we're down at the lower right, maybe about the 5 o'clock position over here. So we've got the development authority holding title, and it doesn't pay property tax on the legal title, so great. But if you stop there, the company's given up the project. It doesn't have the right to use it. It doesn't have the right to get the title back. So we graciously give them, along with the bond, a lease and a dollar purchase option. So at that point, we're down at the 6 o'clock position. So we've got some financial engineering that's been done with the lease because that's potentially separately taxable. And we have the development authority not paying tax on its interest and the company paying no tax or reduced tax on its interest. So we got the property tax abatement in place, and we've got the title where it needs to be in order to make that work. And we've got the company with the right through the lease to be able to occupy and use the project and get it back. But bonds have to be repaid. That's an article of faith with bond lawyers, which I am, that if you issue a bond, that bond's got to be repaid. Well, how do you do it here? The city doesn't repay it, and the DDA doesn't repay it. Your company repays it through that lease. So the lease makes the company pay rent. That rent pays the principal and interest on the bond. And I make the rent and the debt service match up so they cancel out. Then we start moving on up. We're maybe in the 7 or 8 o'clock position there. The company says, all right, now we divided up the interest in the project. I'm concerned about y'all showing up one day or maybe selling this out from under me. And these are revenue bonds. You pledge the lease in order to get the rent there. And you also pledge the other title that you have, except for the rights you reserve to protect yourself. So the company feels comfortable that it's not really giving away its project. And we go on happily. We're up to about the 11 o'clock position now until we're at the end of the abatement period. And we unwind. You know, we give back the deed, they give back the bond, we shake hands and have a party and celebrate our being able to do this. And the point, you see the guy holding the newspaper there with the headlines. this is maybe not new news, but a citywide authority or DDA like our DDA has the same ability as the county development authority to do this. It doesn't take the county or anybody else. It can be done locally. Property tax abatement is a local incentive. So that's a good thing. You have to be wise and judicious in the way that you do it, but it is something that you can do, and this is how it's done. This used to be viewed as magic. It was all behind the curtain like the great and powerful Wizard of Oz, but the curtain's open now, and this is how it's done, and the DDA is right at the middle. This is a DDA-centric structure. The DDA is, you can't do this without the DDA or another authority. So here's how it's been done before. Chambly, I represent their DDA, and they've done a lot of interesting things. And, you know, I didn't mean to get started on grocery stores, but here's a Whole Foods. They wanted a Whole Foods and cut a very rich incentives deal to the developer, but to make sure that they, first of all, got a grocery store and that it was a Whole Foods and it stayed a Whole Foods throughout the term of the abatement. We had a very strong memorandum of understanding, or MOU, and that MOU says basically you've got to achieve your goals and you got to operate a Whole Foods, or we can take this away. We can take all of it away. We can take part of it away at any time. So it's a bargain. It's not, incentives are sometimes thought of as a gift or gratuity. They're not. I mean, if they're a gift or gratuity, you're doing it wrong. What you want is a bargain. And you start out trying to figure out what is the community's need? What is the need that we're trying to solve? And with the developer or the company, okay, is the cost benefit right? Is the public sector going to be better off or at least break even financially on this transaction, even after the abatement? And then the third thing is, what's the justification? Yes, if it's a financial positive, why do you have to have the incentive? Justify that to me, and let's put it in the MOU and button it up so that we get a good bargain and we don't get criticized. Now, you sometimes will get criticized anyway. Dr. C. Clayton Powell, I don't know if any of y'all knew C. Clayton. He was a friend of mine, died recently at the age of 90, I think. Started the Development Authority of Fulton County back in the 70s, and he had a lot of good sayings. And one of them was, he said, Dan, it's okay to make a deal with the devil as long as it's a good deal. So that's what we need to do. We need to be making good deals. And the more, you know, success breeds success. It really does. You have, if you get a reputation for being able to do a deal, you have more deals come to you. If you get a reputation for not being able to do a deal, they stay away. So what you see here is a presentation by a developer to a DDA, and again, this happens to be Chambly, about their town center project. And this is a developer talking about the community and talking about the DDA. And what has happened here is that the DDA has achieved the reputation of being able to do good deals and make projects happen, and they've gotten credibility with the developer as a result of that. And so if they were to do an RFP again, and this was the result of an RFP process, they would likely have a lot more developers responding to their request if they did not have a good reputation for being able to do deals. I mean, it's sad but true that a lot of communities will decide they want to get something done, they have a vision, they need a partner, they go to a lot of trouble, they come up with a list of developers, they send out a request for proposals, and they don't get a single response. That happens a lot, unfortunately. And there's a lot of different reasons for it. We can talk about that later if you want to talk about how RFPs work. But if you start out with credibility, you're going to get responses, and that's important. Using the incentives wisely as a tool is a way that you develop that credibility. The hierarchy, you know, there's always somebody in charge. I have a lot of bosses. But in our world as development authorities, this is the hierarchy. This is the most important slide that you will see. You know, if you're serious about your role as a DDA director, print this slide and pin it up near your computer. because if things get confusing, if people start saying contradictory things, if you start getting criticized, if you're not sure what's right and what's wrong, this will tell you. I mean, this is a funnel chart or a pyramid chart, and you start up at the top. Actually, let's go to the banner up at the top. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do what? What were they doing? That's the preamble.
Comma to Constitution.
Absolutely. That's exactly what it is. Some of the most beautiful words ever written in the English language.
Amen.
And still true today. Still true today. And that's why up at the top of that pyramid, we have the U.S. Constitution and the Georgia Constitution. So why are they on top? Where does their power come from? I'll give you a hint. The answer is with those arrows.
The people.
The people, that's right. The Constitution is the bargain we make among ourselves. You know, I have a very large law firm, and I'm viewed as kind of a maverick because I'm not a big respecter of rules. I like to get things done. But even I can't complain about a rule that I agreed to, right? And that's why the Constitution is on top. That is the promise that us citizens make to each other. And sometimes people forget about it. If we look down at the next two slices of the pie there, we have specific laws like the Downtown Development Authority law that's intended to govern us. And then we have applicable laws like open meetings and open records. They didn't single out DDAs for open meetings and open records. The General Assembly is all public bodies except the General Assembly, because they always exclude themselves, are subject to that. So those are just applicable laws. And where do those laws come from? You know, back in ancient Greece and New England at town meetings, all the voters got together and sat around and decided what the laws were. We're too big for that. So today, instead of, you know, having all the voters in the state of Georgia, you know, getting some big stadium, we elect senators and representatives and send them to Atlanta. And they pass laws, whether we want them to or not. They just can't help themselves. Sometimes they forget about the Constitution. I mean, they pass some laws that are unconstitutional. And that's where the courts come in. The courts will review an act of the General Assembly and say, this is either the people agreed to this and it's constitutional, or the people did not agree to it and then it is unconstitutional. So they've got a place in the hierarchy, and it's a pretty high place, but it's not the top place. And I have, to my right over there, I've got my one bookcase in my office, and it's got a few bound volumes. I'm mostly electronic. I have, if you count my phone, I got two phones over here. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 computers surrounding me in a semicircle. But I have some paper books, and one of them is the Constitution of the state of Georgia. I look at that just about every day. It's that important. And meanwhile, remember, we're a city DDA, but we haven't heard from the city yet, have we? So about halfway down is the local government. The local government, mayor and council meet, they pass a resolution, it activates the DDA, and we're able to do business. They also appoint our directors, and they also decide what our jurisdiction is, because they decide what the central business district is. And at that's the end of their formal involvement. I mean, they've done what they're supposed to do, and we're kind of, life has been breathed into the DDA, and we can start walking around all on our own. Now, that's not the best way to get things done. I'm a real believer in having good relations with your stakeholders. And in fact, with DDAs, the relationship with the city is usually close, and it usually continues to be close, and it's best if it is. But the formal role under the law of the city ends there with that activating resolution, which can be amended. I mean, they can amend it later. So that's a kind of sobering thing to realize that the city's big role in this is to breathe life into the DDA, and that's it. Now we come to you all. our members. So I have the bylaws and I have the board of directors. So where do the bylaws come from? Oh, y'all haven't adopted bylaws, have you? I asked that
Board of
question
Directors.
to a group in training and they said, well, Dan, you sent them to us, but I did, but that didn't make them the bylaws. What made them the bylaws was the board adopting the bylaws. Now, the bylaws are on top of the directors, and this is in order. You know, the most in charge are at the top and the least in charge are at the bottom. You notice the attorney's down at the bottom where he belongs. But the bylaws are on top of the directors. And the reason is this is a nation of laws and not of men. You know, even if you make the rules, you have to follow the rules until you change the rules. And so those bylaws might have things in them like, you know, how much advance notice before a special meeting and things like that that can be inconvenient, but you got to follow them if they're in the bylaws. The directors, we've established where the directors come from. They are appointed by mayor and council. Below that is the officers. Where do the officers come from? Elected by the directors. The Downtown Development Authority's law says who your primary officers are, and we'll cover that in a minute. So you don't get to choose. I was at a meeting with the Constitutional Development Authority, one created by local amendments to the Georgia Constitution one time, and they have a chair or chairman, which is most common. And I said, well, y'all have a chair or a chairman position in your bylaws, but that's not what the local constitutional amendment says. You could change your bylaws and call him the grand poobah if you wanted to, and it'd be okay. There was a move afoot to do that, but it didn't follow through. But in our case, our officers are the chair, a vice chair, a secretary, a treasurer, or a secretary-treasurer, and more information on that. And you can have assistant officers. Now below that is staff. If you don't have staff, who does the work? That's right, you do.
We do.
You're what I call a working board, and that may be fun at first, but after about 2 weeks, it wears off. So there's going to come a time when y'all are real grateful to have Chris around. It's going to make a big difference to you. And then down at the bottom is the attorney who's appointed by the DDA. So that's how it works. And going back to the, you know, it's like combat where there's loud noises and surprises and all the action takes place on the edge of the map, so you can't tell where you are. If it gets confusing about what to believe or who to believe, look at this chart, because this tells you. This tells you who's in charge from the top to the bottom. Except for the court system. There's old Zeus up there with these thunderbolts. That's the old judicial building. We have a new judicial building now. But all of this is subject to interpretation. Somebody once said that the Constitution means what the Supreme Court says it means. And they're right. And that's true of all of this too. I mean, I read a lot of cases. I study them. It's very important to get the nuances on this. And you'll hear some of this later when we talk about public-private partnerships. Just remember, the court system is the wild card. Flowchart, there's not one right way to organize and operate your DDA. The right way is the one that works for you. And that depends on the community. It depends on the people. It depends on the resources you've got, the time you have available. But this is a fairly standard flow chart. On the top is the board, and that's you all. You're the ultimate authority. You will have a chair who is like your chief executive officer, and his direct reports will be the attorney and the executive director / president. There will be other officers, and there may be committees, and they will report up to the chair. And there are dotted lines there. The attorney and executive director interact with the other officers and committees as necessary. And then below the executive director is the other staff. So that's a normal way to operate. It doesn't have to be too formal. You don't have to adopt by resolution a flowchart. But it helps to understand the process and who should be doing what and who reports to whom and who's supposed to know what, to keep this in mind. Now, everybody doesn't have to know everything. Everybody, sometimes you shouldn't know everything because there's prospect confidentiality involved until it comes time to vote. And then you need to have all the information you need to be able to do a good job of voting. That's a normal operational flow chart. The history of all this is an area chart. I'm kind of a data geek if y'all hadn't figured it out already. So Georgia was one of the original 13 colonies. And because of that, we have a long history of constitutions and amendments to constitutions. By 1945, we were on our 8th constitution. We had a statewide pattern of development authorities, cities and counties called the Industrial Development Authorities Law in 63. And in 68, Georgia Constitution was amended to authorize development authorities. So here is our first interaction with an unconstitutional law because the General Assembly passed a statewide law in 1963 that they didn't have the power to enact until 1968. So once we had the new Constitution, the General Assembly adopted the Development Authorities Law. The city of South Fulton Development Authority is under the Development Authorities Law as a citywide development authority. And that law repealed the old 63 law. 76, we had a new Constitution. 81, the General Assembly decided that downtowns were special, and they were right about that, and that there needed to be a special authority for downtown. And they passed the Downtown Development Authorities Law. And that is the law under which your development authority was activated by the city. They also authorized joint development authorities to allow communities to collaborate. In 1983, that's the current Constitution. It was enacted. The old constitutional development authorities, Hateville, for example, has a constitutional development authority. College Park has a constitutional development authority. Those steps were taken to continue those in effect, but about half of the constitutional authorities around the state disappeared in 87 because the steps weren't taken. And then 2004, and this is important, more than one joint development authority was authorized for counties. So that's kind of the background of where all this comes from. There's a tendency, not just in South Fulton and not just in Georgia, but around the country. So if you're involved in one thing and that's all you've ever known, then you tend to think it's just human nature that one thing is the only way to do things, and that other folks can't do it different and you can't do it different. But the reality is that there's a lot of different ways to do things, and you need to know the specifics of your DDA, and you need to know how it is different from the other authorities that might be partners or might be competitors. Another thing to keep in your mind at all the time, and this is important, remember my pyramid chart and where the city was in that? Cities have home rule power. Cities can adopt ordinances, which are like local acts of the General Assembly. They're subordinate to the General Assembly and what it does, so they can't conflict. But cities get used to adopting ordinances and saying that's the law, and up to a point, they're right. But a DDA is a creature of the state. You were created by the General Assembly and you were activated by the city. And the constitutional rules. So the Constitution authorizes the development of trade, commerce, industry, and employment opportunities. You drop down at the bottom and see that arrow that goes all the way down. The Citywide Development Authority has the full gambit of trade, commerce, industry, and employment opportunity powers. All that the Constitution authorized is what that authority was given by the General Assembly. The DDA has the same constitutional basis, but only in two respects. First, our governmental mission is redevelopment and revitalization. It's not development as such. It's revitalization and redevelopment, number one, and number two, only in the central business district. So we don't have citywide powers. To kind of make up for that, the General Assembly very graciously gave us a bunch of other powers. So these are things that we can do that the citywide authority can't do. For example, we can act as an urban redevelopment agency under the urban redevelopment law. If the city creates a business improvement district, which it's authorized to do, then we can be their provider of the supplemental services in that business improvement district instead of the city. And importantly, under the redevelopment powers law, which the city has redevelopment powers and the city has created tax allocation districts, we can serve as a redevelopment agency under the redevelopment powers law within the central business district. The citywide authority is not one of the authorized agencies that's able to do that, but the DDA is, but only within our downtown development area. Is there any questions about that? Okay. Remember, creature of the state, you'll hear it again. Governance. So you by now you know that the governing body activates the DDA by means of an activating resolution. The General Assembly has already created the DDA. The General Assembly created it, but we're not authorized to transact any business or exercise any powers until the city activates it. And the city has to do two specific things in the activating resolution. It's really three. They have to declare a need. But specifically, city has to designate the city's downtown development area, which is your jurisdiction, and appoint the initial directors of the DDA. Let's take a look at how that happened. This is the first page and last page of the activating resolution, which was adopted in September of this year. So the city has acted, and it acted in a detailed and thoughtful way to activate the Downtown Development Authority. Congratulations, the city has breathed life into you. Designate the city's downtown development area. Now there's a map attached, and Chris tells me this is the one that was attached. You see the quote from the activating resolution up at the top. And Chris, would you explain this map? I'm not real good with colors. My wife says I'm colorblind, but it's really not that bad. So
Sure.
tell me where the east side TAD is, the west side TAD is, and where the DDA boundaries are.
Absolutely. So if you look at all of the stuff that's in the orange, yellowish color, that is the Downtown Development Authority district or the area. So that's the area in the city that the DDA will do transact business. The gray area is the entire city boundary. And so the inside of the DDA boundary are the two tax allocation districts. And so the Downtown Development Authority is the official redevelopment agency for the city of South Fulton and will manage both the east side TAD and the west side TAD. And so the darker orange area, which if it weren't covered in orange would be a purple color, is the east side TAD. And that's the area that covers Old National Highway and Roosevelt Highway. And then on the top left part that has a different color, if it weren't orange, it would be green, and that's the west side TAD. And that's everything that's on Camp Creek Parkway, going towards Sandtown area, then back over to Cascade Palmetto, going all the way down to Campbellton, where the new Campbellton Town Center project is. So what we did was make sure that those commercial nodes that were in the Economic Development Strategic Plan, they're all in a tax allocation district. So they're either in the east side TAD or the west side TAD. And then layered on top of that is the DDA boundary. So the Economic Development Strategic Plan, the Tax Allocation Redevelopment Plan, and the Downtown Development Authority, they all layer on top of each other.
If we have some time when I get through the basic presentation, we ought to talk to the board members about a tax allocation district and how it works. But, you know, I've been involved in new DDAs probably more than anybody. And a lot of times the initial meeting, they sit around and talk about, well, what is it we're supposed to do? What is our mission? Do we have any work to do? Y'all got work to do. You're starting out with a very important role. And this, Chris, this reminds me, this was in 2018. You've been hired but hadn't started yet. And I was attending a day-long program in the city of South Fulton talking about development authorities, and they had the city map. You remember that laid out on a big table? You went over and looked at that, and I looked at where the city's borders are and how spread out it was, and I said, Chris, you got your work cut out for you.
Yeah, I remember that. That was like
And you board members do too. This
Yeah.
is, y'all gonna be busy. And this is busy in an exciting way. This is very, very exciting. The resolution calls y'all the inaugural board. So you're inaugurating a bunch of good new things. It's just exciting to see right out of the chute like this almost. You've got your DDA, you've got not one but two TADs. The DDA is the Redevelopment Agency. I mean, it's just, great things are ahead. They really are. All right, appoint the initial directors. They did that. There's your names, everybody. It doesn't say, really, it's the whole governing body. It's not an individual city council person who does the appointment. The procedure may be that nominations are honored, and so in effect, an individual council person is getting somebody elected. But this is what the mayor and council did in terms of appointing the initial director. So your name ought to be on there. I see names that are very familiar now since this morning, and some since prior to that. But congratulations, inaugural members. Organization. If y'all counted, you know that you have 7 members. You have exactly 7 members, not more, not less. The citywide authority can have between 7 and 9, and the city gets to determine. Both the citywide authority and the DDA can have 1 person from the mayor or council as a member. And after the initial appointments, which are staggered, all the directors have 4-year terms, except if you have a city official as a member, their term ends when they're no longer in office. This is interesting here. So if we have 7 members, how many are a quorum? That's not a trick question.
7.
Well, if you have 7 and 4 show up, you've got enough to do business. So that 4 is a quorum. And unlike the citywide authority, the citywide authority takes a majority of the whole board to pass a resolution. With the DDA, unless you're designating something as a project or issuing debt, a majority of the quorum can pass a resolution. So if you have the minimum there, which is 4, and the minimum to pass a resolution votes for it, that's 3, then you can pass a resolution except for designating something a project or issuing debt. I actually had this come up the other day. So we had a 7-person board, and it just shook out that the officers were elected by 3 people. 3 people elected all the officers. It's an interesting world. The bylaws, I can help y'all with that. And really, they should be as standard as possible and as short as possible. I see a lot of authorities throwing stuff in there. Some of it is just wrong, and some of it may be right, such as saying we will have 7 members, but what happens if the General Assembly changes things? I mean, they're on top of that pyramid. If they change it, it's changed. But you can decide how long an officer has a term. I just did some bylaws for a new city in DeKalb County, one of the new cities. And they decided that their officers would have 2-year terms, that they get elected every other year. That's unusual. Most terms are for 1 year. Incidentally, y'all don't need to feel bad about not having bylaws. That development authority I'm mentioning has been in business almost since the city was created, and that's been 5 or 6 years. And I just helped them get their bylaws done. They went 6 years without bylaws. And as noted before, that last bullet point, you got to comply with the bylaws and be sure you're happy with them. Over here are your primary officers, chair and vice chair. The law hasn't been updated, so it says chairman and vice chairman. That's what it says in the statute. Both of those have to be members of the authority. You can have a secretary and a treasurer, or a secretary-treasurer who do not have to be authority members. If we decide to have a secretary, if we decide to combine secretary and treasurer, let's make sure we call it a secretary-treasurer, because slash means or. A lot of things I see is sometimes in bylaws, it'll be secretary/treasurer, and you don't know whether they're the secretary or the treasurer. You know, they're one or the other, but not which one. And you can have assistant officers. It's probably a good idea to have your staff, someone from the staff, which is Chris right now, be assistant secretary. Otherwise, you're going to have to chase down the secretary every time the chairman's signature needs to be attested. And maybe the secretary doesn't mind, but sometimes it's really convenient to have an assistant secretary right there on the scene to attest. Two things you need. You need coffee. I tell my dogs, daddy's run on coffee. I got to get my coffee. And you got to have bylaws. So you're not really complete until you have your bylaws and elect your officers. Director qualifications, y'all have been appointed, but for future reference, in order to be a board member of a DDA, you got to fall in one or more of these categories. So it's okay if you're a city resident, you can be on the board. If you're a resident of Fulton County and own or operate a business in the downtown development area, you can be on the board, or you can be both of those things, or you can be a member of the city's governing body. Now, 4 of those, remember there's 7 total, have to have or represent a party who has an economic interest in the revitalization, redevelopment of the downtown development area. That's not a formality. That needs some thought. I've had open record requests asking for evidence that DDA board members have or represent a party who has an economic interest in the redevelopment and revitalization of the downtown development area. That's not usually because the person asking or making the open records request cares about economic development or revitalization or redevelopment. They're just trying to mess with you. The appointing resolution, and we'll see that in a minute. I don't think this one assigned qualifications. I don't think it noted city resident of cities, county, and own or operate a business. I don't think it noted those things, but I've seen that done where the resolution itself attests to the satisfaction of that qualification, so you don't have to get into it again. Now, another thing to look out for is this last category here, which was added later. So, you know, anybody living anywhere in the state of Georgia who owns a business in the downtown area, doesn't say operate, but owns. You can have one member who lives anywhere in the state and owns a business downtown who can be on your board. So I heard one of our members say that our member has experience with lobbying. So let me ask our lobbyist member, do you think that that number 5 was added because somebody got up one day and said, oh my gosh, we've overlooked something that's vitally important for public policy. We must rush out and add number 5. Or do you think somebody got up one day and said, one of my buddies wants to be on the Downtown Development Authority board. I better get the law amended so my buddy can be on the board. Which one do you think?
I like the second one.
I do too. I think that's what happened. So I've been the chair 3 times now. I had 3 tours as chair of the Georgia Economic Developers Association's Public Policy Committee. And I didn't used to be cynical, but you can't do that 3 times without being a little cynical. Winston Churchill said, democracy is the worst form of government except for all the others. And he was right. So this is what the activating resolution says about it. So it recognizes the first 3 or 4 categories. It did not recognize the resident of Georgia and owning a business in the downtown area. So I don't know whether that was on purpose, whether they don't like people living outside Fulton County or what. But in the activating resolution, it doesn't say that. Now, suppose the city council got together next, well, we can't add anybody, but next time there's a vacancy and they go and elect somebody and then find out that he doesn't satisfy any of the qualifications except for the one that's not in the resolution that's got the big mark out symbol on it here. What happens then? Well, remember our pyramid? Remember that the General Assembly is on top of the city. So if council decided, and just whether they did it on purpose or just absent-mindedly and didn't amend the activating resolution, they could still go ahead and appoint somebody in this fifth category because that's what the law says. Staff. Provide support to the officers and board. And I'm telling you, if y'all don't appreciate Chris now, you will before it's over. A DDA can hire and compensate its staff, but a lot of times they are loaned, assigned, or seconded by the city. So you have a city employee, one of their jobs is being staff of the DDA, and that's very, very common. But regular salary is not paid by the DDA, so they're appointed instead of hired. So your bylaws ought to say you can hire or appoint an executive director. Sometimes you want to pay extra compensation and they earn it. You can't bonus them. I mean, this quote from the Atlanta Business Chronicle is that mess in Atlanta with the Christmas parties and the ugly sweater contest and stuff like that. So you can't, it's actually in the Constitution. You can't in this state give extra money to somebody for work they've already done. What you can do is to supplement their salary, and that's done a lot with Superior Court judges. For example, they get a state salary, and a lot of them also get a check from the county, and it's not a bonus. It's a salary supplement for work to be done. Issues about who is the employer and who has the liabilities. If your staff member jumps in a city car, but he's on DDA business and runs into a school bus, who gets sued? Well, the answer is everybody. This is America. Everybody in America has a free and equal chance to be a defendant. And in that particular example, if the staff member is on DDA business, there would be vicarious liability if that staff member were negligent. And so what is a solution to that? Who has the one sentence or one word solution to that issue? Starts with an I.
Insurance.
Absolutely. You can never have too much insurance. If we are relying on the city's GIRMA policy, GIRMA stands for Georgia Interlocal Risk Management Agency. It's something GMA does to offer insurance to cities and their agencies. Their thought process about whether an authority is covered by that city insurance is a little not good. So I wouldn't just rely on that. I'd want to get a certificate of insurance. So if we're relying on GIRMA insurance, get a certificate from GIRMA saying that we're covered. And a lot of DDAs are buying their own insurance. I mean, it's not expensive now. It used to be, but it's not now. But just make sure you're insured. That's really, 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 really important. Staff can be loaned, assigned, or seconded. I'm real proud of Chris. I mean, I think that's a great picture. I mean, this is great for the community. And it's baked into your resolution. It's very specific. So the city has to provide the administrative support, and it tells you who it is. And I've not actually seen this in an activating resolution before, but I like it a lot. I mean, I think that's going to be very helpful to the DDA as you go forward. The attorney, again, this is America. I mean, we don't have too many lawyers in this country. Some people actually have to share a lawyer so that he represents more than one person. But the DDA chooses its own lawyer. His job is to advise the board, the officers, and the staff to represent the interests of the Downtown Development Authority. For example, if he's issuer's counsel, if you issue revenue bonds. Jurisdiction, very important, particularly with the city, in a city with the borders that the city of South Fulton has. So you're supposed to operate in the downtown development area, and how is it determined? The law says it's the area which in the judgment of the city constitutes a central business district. And it can be updated. Y'all are brand new, so you're not going to need updating for a while, probably. But in some cases, DDAs haven't changed their downtown area designation in their activating resolution since 30 years, some of them, if they were activated in the 80s. You can't be arbitrary about it. This is an unreported case. I can't look it up in the law books, but I remember this where some downtown merchants sued a development authority for providing for some incentives for a big box retailer that was located across the river. And I'm sure they were very concerned about public policy and didn't care anything about the competition. But the judge agreed that he's kind of like, I don't know where the downtown is, but I know it's not across the river. So that's an extreme case. As long as the city is reasonable and not arbitrary about it, the downtown area is whatever the city says it is. This is a nested Venn diagram, just to show you how many authorities that we have in the state of Georgia. You begin at the center, and as you move out, the jurisdiction expands. So the DDA has jurisdiction within the central business district. The city authority has jurisdiction outside the central business district, but also inside the central business district. So the citywide authority could actually do deals within the central business district. There are some city authorities created under the Georgia Constitution that have jurisdiction within a radius. The city of Canton's jurisdiction is 5 miles from, or the Canton City Development Authority's jurisdiction is within 5 miles of the center of the city. So it kind of floats. Center of the city moves around with annexation and all, then their jurisdiction moves around. All county authorities have jurisdiction countywide. And there's some constitutional city authorities that, even though they're a city authority, have jurisdiction countywide. The payroll development authorities in Carrollton and Thomasville are examples of that. Here's your particular situation. So you've got jurisdiction in the central business district. The citywide authority has jurisdiction in the city, including within the central business district. And the Development Authority of Fulton County's got jurisdiction throughout the city and through all the other cities in Fulton County, as well as that little bit left of Fulton County that's not incorporated. And they're very busy. This is from the, I can't read that myself, about 2 months ago. Development Authority of Fulton County agenda had 3 Palmetto deals on the calendar. One was a $420 million Microsoft data center, and there's a phase 2 that's also $420 million in Palmetto. And these other 2 were industrial deals in the city of Palmetto. So the county authority is very active within cities in Fulton County. City of Atlanta is not too happy about it, though. They've called on, by resolution asking the county authority to stop doing those deals, and that's politics, really. If you are a smaller community, which is really trying to do the best for your community, the way to do this is in a positive way. Don't say stay out, but say to your prospect, look, we need to have local control over policy decisions and how the city grows. And say, we offer a partnership to you that somebody who's not within the city's borders can offer to you, because we're local. We're your zoning, we're your business license, we've got our city programs and all that. So, treat that in a positive way, and you'll have better results. You've got to be in the game first, but if you're in the game, that's the way to succeed at it. What you can do, projects. So there's a case. This is the Union City case, the Odom case from 1983. And now I represent a lot of development authorities, and was talking to them. I guess this was at a GMA meeting. I talked to Mayor Vince Williams about this case. And he said, don't blame me. We didn't even know about it. That was a long time ago. But this was a test case as to whether a statutory under the Downtown Development Authorities Law, DDA, could carry out a project that was public project. In this particular case, it was streets and a jail. But, there was some good and some bad that came out of that. I mean, the bad, I guess, maybe it was the right decision, but it was a bad result in the case, is that you a DDA can't do a purely public project like a city administration building. The good was that it recognized that as far as private commercial projects go, you've got all the powers that there is to give. So you can do any kind of commercial project, but it's got to be for revitalization, redevelopment, and it's got to be within the central business district. Project is anything. If you read this closely, some lawyer wrote this, it's land and personal property. So, you learn in law school, well, what is a contract? Well, it's everything that's not a tort. Well, what is a tort? Well, it's everything that's not a contract. Well, it's real property, everything that's not personal property. So this is everything, okay? But it's got to be for an authorized purpose. And this is the purpose that DDAs carry out projects for. And basically that's everything that you would see with a private project. The one notable thing that we're not authorized to do is single family residential housing or for sale residential housing. That's not economic development. We can do multifamily because that's commercial, and we can do senior living because that's commercial. The only exception to these rules is property assessed clean energy projects. For some reason, the General Assembly thought we ought to do citywide, but the rationale of that, which is special service districts, doesn't work in Georgia because you can't use an SSD for private property. So it's there, but it doesn't really mean anything. P3s, public-private partnerships. Now, you know, it's been a long time since a project of any size got done in this state without cooperation between the public sector and the private sector. It just takes it these days. So this is the language that you just looked at, and you notice that it's got public in there in the list of powers and purposes, even though Odom says that you can't do a purely public project. However, the very first Underground Atlanta case in 1985 says, well, I know I said two years before that you can't do a purely public project, but, and I know that this has got public components, but it's also got private components. And as long as your public components and your private components are properly integrated, you, a DDA, can do a public-private partnership or a P3. And that's a very important power. It's kind of a loophole, but the Supreme Court said I can do it, so I do it a lot. That's how you get stuff done. Here's an example. This was one of my favorite cities, and Chris's too, down in Albany. Growing up in McRae, we called it Albany, but I'm in the big city now, so I say Albany. So in Albany, I mean, I can't tell you how fantastic this project was. I mean, this Pine Street down there where nothing ever happened, and, you know, in McRae, where I grew up, city of McRae, you know, at one point in time, we had boarded up windows on Main Street. I'm not kidding. You drive through there, and on 341, US 341, you'd see boarded up storefronts on the Main Street. That's just terrible. Pine Street wasn't as bad as that, but it was pretty bad. And what happened was there was some city-owned property that was not usable for anything, not worth anything. It was owned by ADDA, which was a local act authority. ADDA transferred it to the DDA, which ground leased it to the microbrewery. The city funded the DDA to make a loan to the developer for the construction of the Pretoria Fields microbrewery. And it's just sparked all kinds of redevelopment down there. We got a hotel, we've got a restaurant, we've got retail. And, you know, if you bring people downtown, you give them something to do, you let dollars turn over. One of our projects was housing multifamily, because, you know, if you want to live, work, play, shop, you got to have a place to live. And so we took an old hotel that was not in service and made it into apartments with retail on the ground floor. I mean, all kind of works together. But it takes determination, and it takes resources, and it takes a plan, and it takes an active DDA. There's that pesky Constitution again. I told you about gifts and gratuities. This is kind of the opposite of DDA man, my superhero. I don't think he's a villain exactly, but he does look puzzled. Did y'all know that Georgia was once the largest state in the union? Look at there. When we started out, we went all the way to California. And then when they cut back, we owned Alabama and Mississippi. I mean, that was some good real estate, or if not good, at least a lot of it. Unfortunately, along came the greedy real estate developers, and we had the Yazoo land fraud controversy, where, and this is on the internet, so it must be true. The greedy real estate developers bribed the governor and bribed a majority of the General Assembly, and they sold Alabama and Mississippi. Who would like to guess what an acre of land sold for in that transaction? Somebody give me a number. What would you pay for an acre of land in Mississippi or Alabama back in the 18th century? Somebody give me a number.
$300.
Dollars.
2 cents.
2 cents. Oh, wow.
Now, 2 cents would buy a lot more back then than it would buy today, but it wouldn't buy much. So this went all, and of course, you know, when the AJC found out, actually, I don't think it was the AJC, but there's always somebody like AJC. When the AJC found out and it got to be public knowledge, then there was a lawsuit over it. It went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said a deal's a deal. There's nothing you can do about it. Well, it may not have been anything we could do about selling Alabama and Mississippi, but we changed the Constitution so you can't do it again. That's where the prohibition on gifts and gratuities came. So this is another Attorney General's opinion. The idea is that if you sell something, if you're a public body, you got to get the fair market value one way or another. You get it in cash or you get it in kind, in some other kind of valuable consideration, or you get it in a combination of cash or in kind. So, and this AG's opinion has to do with somebody actually sold some land and forgot to reserve an access easement. So he was landlocked. He landlocked himself. Probably his lawyer got in trouble about that, and he should have. But then the landowner went to the Georgia Department of Transportation and said, I'm landlocked and y'all grant me an easement. And they said, well, we'd like to, but that's worth something. So we got to check with the Attorney General's office. And the Attorney General's office said, what you see here, you can't just give the man an easement. He's got to provide cash or some other substantial benefit equivalent to what the fair market value is. And that is how we got to today with MOU and the bargains that we make with our prospects. If state money is in a deal, they're asking for jobs and investment, and they want 80% of the goal attained. And if you achieve 80%, you, the company, achieve the 80%, you get to the end of your lease and you get your essentially grant, and it's free. If you don't, then you get a clawback. So that's the enforcement mechanism. You have to pay back the shortfall. This is something y'all might want to stop and think about. And I realize you probably don't have, I mean, it's December and you started in September, so you probably don't have a pipeline of projects yet, although you never know. I mean, I helped to activate a development authority in Warner Robins, and at our very first meeting, we adopted an inducement resolution for some affordable housing. So it does happen. But if you're not already under the gun, think about what you're bargaining for. You know, the state says, I want jobs and I want investment, and that's traditional economic development. The communities are saying, well, there's other things that are important. So look at how they rank this in this survey. So investment and jobs are number one and number two. Business growth. Am I investing in a business that's going to stagnate and not ever create more jobs and not ever put more vitality in the community? Or are you going to grow? Are you paying your workers? Is your business sustainable? Are you a startup? I mean, that's kind of exciting. What about exports? So this is across the country, and it's all kinds of programs. It's not property tax abatement, just property tax abatement, but it's all sorts of programs. But this is what communities across the country are bargaining for. These are the things that are important to them. So let me ask you, board members, somebody, if you were cutting a deal with an economic development prospect and he says, I want you to do X for me, what would you say to that company or that developer? What is the why? What is it that you want that company or that developer to do for the city of South Fulton? Somebody give me some thoughts, please.
Jobs.
Always good, particularly now. Sustainability during the pandemic, that sort of thing. Any other thoughts? Well, you've got time. Be thinking about what it is you want, because the time will come when you'll be challenged to cut that bargain.
Actually, Dan, we have the council pass an economic development incentive ordinance, which spells out the community benefits that we get when we give an incentive. So some of those things are already spelled out in an ordinance that's been passed by mayor and council.
Chris, do you happen to remember what they are? Can you review that for the board?
Yeah, so it's a percentage point of the overall project cost that has to go either into parks or recreation, economic development, or public art. So there's a percentage that they contribute, and then they have to have. Then of course, then there's this benchmarks. They got to hit like a certain amount of capital investment, and then a certain amount of jobs at 1.25% of the county. So some of the boilerplate stuff, but the community benefits part is kind of the unique part in there that they have to present, have to contribute to either public art or to parks and recreation or to economic development.
That's very thoughtful. I mean, that's great. It gives you an idea right away of what the city's looking for, and the city's our partner. Rules you have to follow. I thought about trying to get into this in more detail this morning, but we're about out of time now. And these really are separate sessions. Chris, I'd be glad to come back. Might want to do it next year to do a session on open meetings, open records, and compliance ethics. But as I said earlier, you all are public officials now. Your records, unless they're exempt, are subject to public inspection. Your meetings, unless you have a legal reason to go into an executive session, have to be open. There are notice requirements that apply. And, open records, for example, include, you remember DDA man in my first slide? If he's sending emails on his personal device about DDA business, those emails are subject to open records. People can ask for that, and he would have to produce it. State Code of Ethics, the one that gets the most attention is the prohibition of financial self-dealing. There's a safe harbor. If one of our directors has an interest in a transaction that wants to occur with the DDA, then we have to take the steps that are required to immunize the director and immunize the board from being conflicted out of the transaction. So there is a safe harbor, but there's also, unless you're in the safe harbor, there's a prohibition on financial self-dealing. There's a bunch of other prohibitions as well. Public benefits, Georgia Local Government Public Works Construction Law. Sometimes we have purely DDA projects where we do comply. We have to do bids or RFPs. If it's a private sector project, we can structure it properly so that it doesn't have to go through that process. Stakeholders, that's very important. And every time I do this presentation, well, not every time, but most times I end up with more suggestions to go on this list about who your stakeholders are. So obviously the city, I've learned that the city manager is not the same as the city, not the same as mayor and council. City offices, remember, if you're saying to a company, we're best suited to partner with you because we're your local partner and we're able to do things for you, you have to be able to do those things. So we need to have good relations with planning and zoning, building permits and all. The business owners and the property owners, they know where you live. They'll walk into your place of business. They'll stop by your house. Being a DDA member is, almost like being an elected official. People feel like they got the right to stop you and talk to you and tell you what's on their mind. Chamber of Commerce, a lot of places the chamber is a partner. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes the county is a partner. Sometimes it's not. Other local authorities, remember all those local authorities that I listed in my nested Venn diagram, and local officials like the County Board of Tax Assessors, those are good partners. The public, don't have to be a business owner, don't have to be a property owner, just a member of the public. The State Department of Community Affairs is most well known as being a partner with DDAs. Those are great folks, and they provide good support to us. Georgia Department of Economic Development, DDAs didn't used to think they had much to do with the Department of Economic Development, but the reality of the situation is we've had one DDA, and it was one in Doraville, be the lead local agency on a state headquarters project. That was the Serta Simmons project in Doraville. So you had a DDA for the first time ever be the state lead, interacting directly with the State Department of Economic Development. State legislative delegation, it's always good to be tight with your legislators because they can do more harm by accident than most people can do on purpose. They just need to understand who we are and what our needs are and what's important to us. Sometimes people say the federal legislative delegation. I got to tell you, I mean, I used to poo-poo that, but so much CARES Act money. I've helped set up grant and loan programs in a number of cities and with a number of authorities in the state of Georgia. And that kind of has been really important recently. If your relations are bad with your stakeholders, that's too bad, because we're perpetual. DDAs are forever, can't be dissolved. You're only activated one time, so you only have one DDA, although that activating a resolution can be amended. If you manage to, I don't know how this would happen. I'm sure there's nothing but good things, but in some places, every now and then, there's a falling out between the DDA and the city, or between a DDA board member and the city. I actually had one DDA I represent where the vice chair ran for mayor without resigning from the DDA board. In the same city later, the DDA had an executive session to talk about the town center project and didn't let the mayor stay in the executive session. So it's possible to get crosswise, but you can't be removed. There's no way for the city to remove a DDA member. If you violate the code of ethics, the governor can if it goes up the process. I see sometimes in those bylaws that I mentioned that if you miss a certain number of meetings, the other directors can vote you off the board. No, they can't. If the city can't remove you, the board certainly can't remove another director, even if they miss meetings. But there is, the city's control. There's two primary means of control. One is the power of appointment. And you see how that works in the bottom chart here. Each of you has a term, and you saw your term earlier on the slide. But as you reach the end of your term, if you're reappointed, or your successor, get 4-year terms. And the purpose of that is to stagger the board, so you don't have everybody leaving at once and have all new people with no background. I looked to see if it matched up correctly, and I was delighted that it did. I don't know whether you're happy with the terms of office that you got, but at least the right number of people were appointed for each number of years that corresponds to what the law provides. Financing, this is one of Dan's rules for life. Back when I had time to do infographics just for fun, I did this one. But I think it is a real rule for life. If you got money, anything's possible. If you don't, nothing is. I mean, it's hard. And where does a DDA get their money? Well, you can't tax. So believe it or not, sometimes people are confused about whether authorities can tax, and they can't. There's some constitutional DDAs created under the Georgia Constitution by local constitutional amendment that can assess within their area. But our statutory DDA can't. Most constitutional authorities can't. And you can't outright tax the citizens just to support yourself. So a lot of places you start out with an initial seed money grant. Chamblee, for example, started with a $50,000 grant from the city. In others, it's an annual appropriation. I call this singing for your supper. Once a year at budget time, the DDA goes and begs for enough money to stay in business for another year. Some authorities are blessed by having a multi-year agreement, an intergovernmental agreement with the city, where the city agrees to provide funding, which can be in a certain amount, not more than the equivalent of 3 mills of tax, and for a certain period of time, up to 50 years, which is what the Constitution allows. But usually it's not 50 years usually. But some authorities are lucky enough to have a contract that says you will get funded. You know what's going to be in your budget for the next few years. So what does our DDA have? Well, let me mention these before I skip to the finale. So sometimes you can get grants and loans. It's not true that DCA will give you some money for activating an authority. Sometimes they have program grants. Sometimes you have corporations make donations. Usually that's when they've closed down an operation And to avoid or mitigate the ill will, they'll donate their building to an authority. Now that can carry with it environmental issues, so you need to be careful about it. If you are doing bond transactions, you have the opportunity to get a one-time fee at closing. That's normal, 1/8 to 1%. Some authorities, if they do longer-term deep discount abatements for transformational projects, are charging an annual amount, which provides them with guaranteed funding for a period of time. This authority was blessed by the mayor and council with funding through fiscal year 2026 of $150,000 a year, which I've not seen this in an activating resolution before. It would give our board members a lot of comfort to know that you've got an operating budget to work with. Now, this isn't an intergovernmental contract. You don't have contract rights to this, so mayor and council could meet and change it. But the intentions are to fund you up to $150,000 a year, which is a really great start. And it gives you the idea that, yes, we've got something to work with here and we can stay in business. So thank you, mayor and council. Financing powers, I mentioned the issuance of revenue bonds. The city's not liable. The DDA is not liable. The state's not liable.
Dan,
Revenue.
Dan, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I got a quick question. I'm
Yes, sir.
raising my hand, but I guess I'm not using those Zoom capabilities.
It could be me.
No problem. This is actually more directed toward Chris. The resolution that the ordinance that you mentioned, those funds that come back for economic development, do they come back to the DDA, or do they go into the city's overall budget? Are any of those funds returning to support the continued work of the DDA?
Are you saying we do a bond deal and get fees from the bonds?
No, you mentioned that a part of the ordinance that was passed by the city, part of it was for economic development, and I was just wondering if that was funds that come from a deal that comes back into the DDA.
Oh, okay. So from the community benefits part of the incentive ordinance, the developer gets to decide which of the three categories, if they want it to go to parks and recreation, if they want it to go to public art, or if they want it to go economic development. Right now, what we haven't done any deals since the ordinance has been passed, but in theory, what we would do is invest that money into small business programming. So like our Collapse South Small Business Resource Center. So basically what we want to do is incentivize usually when a developer gets an incentive, they're usually large developers. And so we're trying to take that large scale money and invest it into small businesses. So
okay. And another question around the 150,000. That's a great gift. It's not a large amount of money. Are there restrictions around the use of those funds?
Well, it would be for the operation of the DDA. So it's a line item in the economic development budget that's allocated just for DDA purposes. So, paying fees for stuff, like for example, training for you all is like $250 a person. That would come out of that 150. If we were to put together some promotional materials, let's say we have a piece of land and we're trying to promote it for a project or something, we could put together a promotional packet. If we needed to pay for an architect, engineer, something like that, you could use that money to fund that.
Say that we decide that we want to increase or add to that, to your compensation. Does that money come from a different place, or is it in this amount that has been allotted?
Yeah, that wouldn't come from that 150 because that's money from the city. Now, if the DDA generated its own revenue and decided, hey, we wanted to compensate Chris more, then you could probably do that, but it probably would not be appropriate to come out of that 150 that the city allocates.
Thank you.
Good question.
Do you have any insight on that, Dan?
I agree with what was said. Again, I think it's wonderful to start out with this level of support from the city. And there will be opportunities for the DDA as we go forward. You never have enough money, but remember Dan's rule for life. If you've got money, anything's possible. If you don't, nothing is. So we're off to a good start. and then sometimes there's confusion about this. You know, you have to advertise. There's a whole other session we could have on bonds if you want to do that. And I lay out the flow chart for the bond process. The issuance of a bond involves 2 public ads to give the public notice of the validation hearing. You don't hear this much anymore, but sometimes you do. People reading the ad saying, oh my gosh, the Development Authority of Fulton County is issuing $420 million in revenue bonds for a Microsoft project. Why are the taxpayers having to repay $420 million to give the money to Microsoft? Well, that's not what's happening. You couldn't do that if you wanted to, because remember that very first slide, protect the city. We can't commit the city's taxing power. Now, if the city wanted to do it in an authorized way, the city could back DDA bonds with an intergovernmental agreement up to 3 mils, and those are called contract revenue bonds. That's done. This is another Chamblee slide. Chamblee created a town center through the DDA. The DDA actually issued bonds backed by intergovernmental agreements where the city pledged revenue. We bought properties to put together to be the town center. Some of them were already leased, and for the interim, that debt's pretty much been carrying itself. We've been getting in lease revenue to pay the debt service with. Now the city, as we start to take those properties out of DDA ownership and put them to the purpose that they were intended to be, to develop the town center according to the master plan, that revenue will go away. But hopefully as that occurs, then the bonds will get paid down. But you see where the city's financial advisor reviewed that and said, hey, you're doing fine. So that's an option that the city and the DDA have to do something like this in partnership if there's ever the desire to do it. Hey, conclusion. So, you know, I like development authorities. Georgia is a development authority centric state. South Carolina really has one development authority. It's a Jobs Economic Development Authority, and they do everything statewide. So if you want to get something done in South Carolina, you go to Columbia. If we had the same system, if you wanted to get anything done in Georgia, you'd have to go to Atlanta and talk to one guy. So I think our system's better because it gives local control. But if we've got so many development authorities, again, remember that nested Venn diagram with all those other authorities. Why do we need a DDA? Why did the General Assembly in 1981 pass a law creating yet another kind of development authority, the DDA? Well, I think I got the answer to that. In fact, there's more than one answer. So one size doesn't fit all. One of the complaints that cities have is they get ignored by counties. And in economic development, I think the history of that is true. I mean, the history of economic development going back to when the Development Authorities Law was passed in 1969. Remember, Constitution amended 68, law passed 69. Back then, projects were industrial. It was manufacturing and distribution, and they were out in the country, and that's all there was to it. That's why we have so many definitions of project in the Development Authorities Law. We've evolved over time. The DDA definition is the most general and fits all commercial projects. But the reason is that we're not concerned about industrial manufacturing plants out in the country. We're concerned about what happens in the city of South Fulton, specifically what happens downtown. We need our own board, we need our own tools, and you know from one of my slides that you've got special tools that nobody else has. So we can respond to those needs, and we're the most involved. We have to. Our board represents the downtown stakeholders because the law requires it. And you will have people knocking on your door. So I really do think that a DDA is important and necessary, particularly in a relatively new city and a city that's beginning to take strides forward. You're off to a great start. Starting out with 2 TADs, being designated the redevelopment agency, getting funding, have all the thought and work that's gone into setting up the DDA. So you're off to a great start. I've covered a lot of territory. I hope I've answered all your questions. If you have more questions now, I'd be glad to respond, but this isn't your only chance. I mean, you see my contact information, call or email. I'll respond or ask Chris, and Chris and I'll get together. But I'm really excited about where you are, and even more excited about where you're going. So, any questions?
I have two.
Yes, sir.
I'll combine them. I'm assuming with the areas that we're covering, we consider multiple areas downtown. We have not a downtown area, but multiple downtowns. And also, I'm just curious about what's the potential for conflict when actually we're supposed to be, or we can be, working together with other development authorities, the city and the county and that kind of thing. How do we avoid conflict when we're all trying to, or say we're trying to do the same thing?
Well, you don't have an easier question for me? It's, part of it is the fact that, I mean, I don't mean to insult anybody when I say that nobody cares more about the downtown than the DDA does. So it's within the downtown area. I mean, how much attention in the past has the downtown of what's now the city of South Fulton gotten from anybody? And that's one reason we have, that's right, that's one reason we have a new city, right? So in large part, we have to do this if we want to get it done. As you grow and become more successful, you attract attention and you attract competitors, and there can be some friction. I don't know what these other cities think about other authorities going into their jurisdiction and doing things, because it does affect. I'll give you another war story. So there is a state program called I think it was an opportunity zone, state opportunity zone, not a federal opportunity zone. You remember my Chambly, oops, I gave the name away. There's this hypothetical community that was putting together a town center and had a plan and was assembling properties, and yet the county applied to the state to put a state OZ in the middle of what they were trying to do. And it's different incentives and would have led to a different result. And we were able to eventually get that abandoned. But if you don't have control over what's going on, you'll get results that you don't want. So sometimes, your stakeholders or would-be stakeholders will listen to reason and listen to you. Sometimes they have their own opinions. You remember that slide I showed you about that? The image was a meeting of the Development Authority of Fulton County, and the text was about the City of Atlanta's resolution saying don't do that. So there can be conflict, but that goes back to staying the course. The developers, the DDA members being willing to do what Rosalind Carter recommended. You be great leaders and take folks where they need to be, and realize that you're not going to get applause from all quarters for doing it.
These are all the questions. You got somebody?
I enjoy doing this, so if you got a question, let it rip, and if you don't, save it up and send me an email, or we'll talk again.
Is it safe to say that the goal of the DDA is not so much profitability or revenue for the city as much as it is development? Or how does that? Because if things are canceling out in terms of bonds, where does the city actually benefit? And is that more in the negotiation process?
I sat in last night on a long debate with a city authority about whether we should do multifamily projects, and you got that same sort of analysis. Your project may burden city services, for example. If it's an apartment project, then you may. If it's a lot of folks coming and going in cars, then there's traffic. If you got kids, it burdens the school system, or they say it does. So you look at it and say, from a financial perspective, if I'm, and helping folks is not always property tax abatement. There's other things that we can do. But if we look at that as an example, there's a fiscal impact study that can be obtained from Georgia Tech. It's fairly routine in Metro Atlanta. So you can look at it, and after the economists have done their studies, and it will tell you whether on a net basis, the city, the county, the school board are better off financially with the project or without it. So that gives you a number with the Georgia Tech, and they're not the only ones that do it, but with the Georgia Tech logo on it that says, okay, here's proof that this is financially to the good. But you don't necessarily want to limit yourself to projects that are always net positives. One of my authorities turned down a deal for a warehouse in the south part of the county and it wouldn't have been many jobs because the school board lost $100,000 over 10 years. And that the authority deferring to the school board and turning that deal down meant that those 12 jobs or 24 jobs, however many they were, they weren't created. And that meant a whole lot more to those folks in that part of the county than $100,000 did. You also have the ability, once, assuming that you've got a project where nobody's suffering any financial loss from it, is it a project that you should do because it advances the goals of the city? So, everybody wants biotech and everybody wants high tech, and not everybody's going to get it. You might not want warehouses. You might want to try to provide incentives when you otherwise wouldn't, or provide more incentives than you otherwise would, in order to get a type of business that you're not getting enough of. There's a project, I'll be able to make an announcement later this month about a bond deal being closed very close to y'all and not by the county authority, where it's an industrial project, but half the size, well, not half, but 60% of the size that it would have been in terms of distribution center, because the deal was struck to take the rest of the land and put commercial and retail and restaurants and maybe offices there. So there's a way for you to both accomplish the financial goals that need to be accomplished. I mean, you can't run everything at a loss. You go out of business. So you got to be sensitive to public revenues, but also be sensitive about your destiny. And I'm excited to hear that the city's got a plan. That doesn't mean that the DDA board members quit thinking. You need to. But you have a lot of ability to influence the results. And if South Fulton today is not everything you want it to be, and you want it to be more or different, you're able to influence that through this DDA.
More questions?
I don't want to take up all of them.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm a person that I don't want to be one of those individuals that doesn't know what you don't know. So it's important for me to grasp as much. When I'm pretty sure anyone that approaches us in any form of a deal is going to come with their best sell, their experts, so forth and so on. What becomes beneficial, or you should say is most beneficial to the board in terms of resources? Do we count on Christopher bringing those resources, or what else outside of an attorney becomes beneficial for us in deliberation around these particular matters?
Well, that's two things. That's how do you market the city? Who do you market it to? And how do you do that deal with the devil that's a good deal once they get there? So I don't know what the city's, I mean, Chris is well known and well respected. So it's a great choice to have him in this position. And Chris probably has thoughts about how you go about, I mean, that Georgia trend, I mean, that was great for the city. It's not just Chris, it's the city that's getting that publicity. So you're on the map. So capitalize on that. And in terms of cutting the deal, I mean, I'd love to cut some deals with you. I'm not worried about you getting good results out of that. You'll get them. I did the first MOU in the state of Georgia, probably back in the 80s, and I think it was a Best Buy project in Dublin, Georgia. At the time, I did that because the consultant told me, Dan, I want an MOU. And I said, what's an MOU? He said, you know, everybody been promising us things. I need to get it all pulled together in one document. I later on figured out what he was doing was figuring out how much the incentives added up to so he could calculate how much his fee was going to be that he was going to charge to the company. But that's when it occurred to me, well, we're pulling together in one place what we're going to do for them. I need to put in here what they're going to do for us. They've been telling us some things, so let's put it down and get some clawbacks in it. And honestly, that's where it all started, and that's been 30 years ago. 25 anyway.
So just to keep everything kind of moving along, and I'm not going to take much more time, and definitely we can ask questions. I just wanted to talk about next steps, just so the folks that need to jump off at 12. On your agenda, you have general information about organization structure. I put those on there not to make a decision about those today, but just so you can think about them for the next meeting, because we do want to kind of move expeditiously. And so thinking about, I have here president, vice president, but chair, vice chair, secretary, dash treasurer.
Good for you.
Executive director, and then thinking about attorney. Now, I'm not sure, you know, you all get to pick who you want to be your attorney. And I'm not sure if Dan McRae is available to be the attorney for the DDA, but it doesn't hurt to ask if y'all want to ask him if he would like to think about adding us to his clientele list. I'll leave that up to the board to decide, and you don't have to do that today. But you know, we need to have an attorney, because these things that we're doing, your attorney is actually going to be more important than I am. So we need to have a good attorney on board as we start to move these projects forward. So definitely something that we need to think about. And then the other thing, which we will talk about at the next meeting, well, is the bylaws. And I'll get with Dan and get some sample bylaws and put some stuff together for the board and then send that out to you all. I think one thing to keep in mind, and I've seen this happen, is, you know, it's not necessarily get bogged down in the bylaws. You can always amend the bylaws if something needs to be changed. So it's not something that needs to take us, you know, 8-9 months to do.
Or 6 years.
Or 6 years, yeah, or 6 years like Dan's client. So, you know, just keep that in mind. As we can tweak them if things don't work, then, you know, there'll be a provision to change portions of the bylaws. But we'll bring those and have those ready for you before the next meeting. Just on general information on C, we did register with the Department of Community Affairs and then get that notification. I'm still submitting the information to the Secretary of State. As a DDA, you have to be registered with Secretary of State's office and Department of Community Affairs. And then we will have more discussion at our next meeting about the tax allocation districts. I will send you all out the plan that was approved by the mayor and council, just so you can familiarize yourself with that. But the TAD is going to really help provide some resources to be able to make certain types of projects happen. And so that tax allocation district, when you talked about where do we get money to do deals, well, this is going to help provide us some fund resources that we would not have otherwise had without the TAD. And so I know Dan has worked on a lot of TAD projects as well, and probably could have some information to provide on that. And then just to finalize everything out, I'll be sending out whenever the list comes out of the training. As Dan said, he could give you credit for your hour and a half that you did today, but there'll be some other opportunities for training. And hopefully when we get back to some normal activity, hopefully next fall or so, we'll be able to go and engage with some other DDA professionals. And that's usually going to these conferences is where you learn stuff. And so it's always a great opportunity. So hopefully we'll get to some of that this year as well. So that's all I really had to discuss on the agenda. Are there any more questions or comments? We wanted to, I guess, set a date where we could have some consistent meetings. Is it best for me to send out a survey, or do you all have a good time? Or Friday's good for you all to meet? Any feedback on meeting dates and times would be really, really good.
Fridays are good.
Fridays generally work for everyone.
Yeah, I'm good with Fridays.
Okay. So I'll send out maybe a survey and get feedback about folks what Friday would work best for everybody. And then we'll schedule a more concrete meeting date so that we kind of can put that on our calendar from moving forward as we get into 2021.
That's my golf day, but I can sacrifice one.
This one day a month. This one day a month.
Chris, given one of the things that Dan mentioned in the conversation, will the city be providing us with emails for communication? I just don't want anything tied up in my personal email. I am a therapist, and I don't,
Sure.
concerned about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I would think that for me, this is just my opinion. The best way I think to handle that would probably be just to create like a Gmail or something just for your role as a DDA member. And then we will use that as our official communication. There was some confusion about setting up one with the city because you're not technically city employees. And so having a city email, I think the IT folks had some concerns with that. So if you just wanted to put like, Williams, sfdda@gmail.com or something like that, I think that would suffice. But I'll let Dan, if Dan has any recommendations.
Let me offer something on that I think will help. If everybody did it uniformly, it'd be easier to keep track of it. So you might have Chris South Fulton DDA@gmail.com. And then if everybody took that same thing and put their first names or however you want to do it, it'd be a lot easier for everybody to remember their email and a lot easier to find emails when you're looking for them in your inbox.
Yeah. So what we'll probably do then, I'll just email out to the board a format. And I think Dan's recommendation, we'll just use your last name, then sfdda@gmail.com. And then that way, everybody knows what everybody's email is. And we know, uniformly that this is where we're going to send correspondence from the DDA. And so if we have an open records request, we would just be pulling out of your DDA email and not any of your personal or business emails.
I like that.
Any other questions? That's a good question. That was excellent.
Chris, I don't have a question, but just wanted to add to something Dan and Mr. Williams had questioned.
Mm-hmm.
Regarding Dan's bullet point under stakeholders and partners. I think I have an addition for you, and that would be the city's CVB department, the Convention and Visitors Bureau.
Okay.
And as our role in being an ambassador to the city, we're always actively marketing the city, and we're always engaging with business owners and having conversations with opportunities for the city. So I think that's just another resource when it comes to marketing that Mr. Williams had questioned. How are we getting the word out about the city? We can use the resources of the CVB as well.
Thank you. You'll see that on the slide the next time.
Yeah, and with my experience with other cities, I've actually seen that happen personally, where as a result of the CVB, there's been businesses that were started in the downtown area through the DDA. And I was very much involved with that.
Excellent, thank you.
And by the way, I'm the manager for the CVB of the City of South Fulton for those that came in after.
Good.
Okay, anything else? Well, listen, I think this was a very productive meeting. Dan, again, we appreciate you taking time out to share with us your knowledge and wisdom in the DDA world. And I hope that that helped answer a lot of folks' questions. And the people are asking me, well, what are we supposed to be doing? I said, just wait till the meeting. Dan will clear it all up for you. He'll either clear it up or make it more confusing, one or the other.
I tell you, I'm going to give everybody 2 hours credit because this has been a great session from the beginning to the end. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here today with you. This is kind of my social life in addition to everything else. So I'll just close by saying Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays and God bless. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. All right. Thanks, everyone. I appreciate your time, and I'll be sending out emails here shortly.
Thank you.
Thanks,
All right,
guys.
thanks, guys.
Hey, thanks for everything.
Bye.
Thank you.